to rebel against mediocrity, like in the most simplest of ways, like taking a risk to break the little bit of rule, to take that little bit of a leap of like that little protest against the bureaucracy. I mean, like literally at the line at Starbucks or something like that. Like even in the tiniest of ways, when I see people, just like it's almost like that little like glimmer in their eye, a wink, like we're in this together. There's all this conformity all around us. That's at a different time could have been Nazi Germany, could have been Stalinist Soviet Union. Sure. We're in this together. We're going to rebel against that conformity by just taking the risk, a little bit of risk against mediocrity.
I think a lot of people are not capable of that.
They're accustomed to it. I don't know if they're not capable.
No, I understand your position. I'm disagreeing with it. I'm saying I do not think they're capable. I think a lot of people effectively don't have souls. They do not have a conscience in this sense where they're going to look at an issue, bring their critical thinking, and say, all right, I'm going to do the right thing, although I'm taking a risk.
I don't think thinking is involved, or is it just taking that leap? There's something about that basic human spirit. Forget the thinking part. It's just saying like, I'll take that risk. They're taking that adventure. The same thing that got people to explore the seas, you know, throughout human civilization, explore land, explore the oceans, like that exploration. Like we've done stuff this way all this time. I'm gonna take a leap, and that comes out of nowhere.
But those people are the heroes. But I don't think that's universal. I'm going to use a very gauche example. There was a show called Scare Tactics, which was basically a candid camera, but they would scare people. Like they'd have vampires, whatever, and hidden camera and people's reactions. And so but sometimes the prank didn't work out like they expected. So there was one where they were hiring the people who were the marks, you know, the contestants, so to speak, who were hired to be a security guard. Okay, and you have to watch this factory overnight, and you get paid. And what the setup was, some people were breaking out of the factory in the middle of the night, like in rags, and they were saying they were keeping us prisoner here, like blah blah, and just watch the person's reaction to this. And there was one security guard where he basically forced them back into the building, and they're working us 24/7. We're getting beaten. He's like, I'm here to do a job. Get back in there. And you watch this, and it never even enters his head to be like, something's wrong here. He was given his orders. He's following his orders. And to me, that is not uncommon. And that person, although they look like you and I, there's something essentially human missing with them. Now, very quickly, the reaction is, well, it's one step from there to Nazism. I don't think it's something I'm not saying this person should be killed, but I'm just saying to expect that every human being has the capacity to have that defiance, especially at a cost of their life. That, I think, is not realistic.
You can run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Sooner or later, it comes you down. Sooner or later, it comes you down.
Go and tell that long-tongued rider. Go and tell that great divider. Tell the reveler, the gatherer, the night rider. Tell them the dogs cut them down.
Listen to them, Marxists. Can you hear the horns honking? Can you hear them? They honk for thee.
I swear to God, we will find them still. When they took away everybody's free will.
Tell the rambler, the gambler, the night, knowing the gods.
Sooner or later, gonna cut you down.
You can run on for a long time.
Run on for a long time.
Run on for a long time.
But sooner or later, God will cut you down. Someday soon, God will cut you down.
You can run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Sooner or later, cut you down. Someday, cut you down. Go and tell that long-tongued liar. Go and tell that midnight rider.
no further ado, Scott Campbell and Jay Shaw, the Unacceptable.
Hey, we're back for the 15th time. Why you're still here is beyond me. We're here because we've got nothing better to do with our time. I figure you're here probably for the same reason. This is number 15 in a series of life decisions you're going to regret. We've got a good show for you. It's Truthy Thursdays. So with me, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, Jay Shaw. Jay, say hello.
What's up, everybody?
So it's Truthy Thursdays. So the theme on Thursdays is that we do my idea is that we do stories that you may or may not know are true, or something that's being presented as false, or perhaps something that was said that you didn't realize was true. That's my idea of the theme. I think, Jay, we're on the same page with that. So that's where we're at. We're going to give you a couple of things out of the news, or some different things that are going on that are true, whether or not you've heard, or whether or not mainstream media agrees with us. We've done our research and we can prove it. So fuck mainstream media and fuck anybody who doubts us. Now, we had some wicked weather in California. They had some incredible snow. There was a bunch of tornadoes in other parts of the state. So the states is getting hammered with weather. And one of the stories I heard is that it's definitely due to man-made climate change. And I'm passionate about that subject, as is my brother in arms here, Jay. And Jay, I think you should be the one to take this one, if you don't mind. Let's squash some beliefs here.
Yeah, you bet. Let's roll it. 3, 2.
People woke up today near Truckee. Snow piled so high they couldn't get out their front doors. Some areas seeing more than 9 feet of snowfall just in the last 7 days. Thousands of people remain without power in areas that are hard to access. Schools have been closed in multiple counties. Blizzard conditions over the past 2 days shut down more than 70 miles of I-80, slowing down trucking businesses and, of course, travelers.
So here is one of 20 glaciers in California. Yes, that's right. 20 glaciers in California. In the Sierra Mountains, like in most mountains, most of the geological history of 4 billion years is going to suggest there's going to be snow. It took a lot of snow to make that glacier, and everybody wants that glacier to stay there. We don't want the glaciers to melt. And yet, when it snows, we call that a climate-related emergency. So do you want the glaciers, or do you not want the glaciers? Here are the beautiful Skimmerhorn Mountains, which are just down the valley from me, about a 10-minute drive. Beautiful, wonderful place. But as you can see, even in June, there's a tremendous amount of snow still in the Skimmerhorns. That's because the annual snowfall on the Skimmerhorn Mountains is 20 to 30 feet. That's right, 20 to 30 feet. That's mountains. And so what's going to happen is every once in a while the weather's going to shift a little bit, and a mountainous area that may have been warm for a while is now going to be cold, and vice versa. That's cycles. Okay? If you are expecting to look at a climate graph and see it flat, here's a little hint. It didn't begin with the Industrial Revolution that you see all kinds of jagged lines on graphs. All the ice core records show that that's the entire Earth's history. The climate goes drastically up and down all the time. It's always been that way. It's never going to change. It's never going to be a flat line. That would be ideal, sure. It's not going to happen. Human beings are well adapted to deal with drastic swings in climate, and if they can't, then they do what any sane creature on the Earth would do, and they migrate.
Imagine that creatures migrate because shit gets cold. And,
I mean, it's pretty black and white, and like I say, these glaciers were created by massive amounts of snow. If anybody's curious how the glaciers are doing, glacier update, there's 197,000 right now. So when you hear the glaciers are disappearing, put that put it into that context, the context of there are 197,000 at this stage in the ice age in which we live. And so the elevating temperature is the results of ice ages come to an end, and eventually the earth normalizes. And what you may not realize in California is that your situation's going to get a little cooler, my situation's going to get a little warmer, and we're going to have a normalized temperature globally. That's what happens when we're not in an ice age. So, you know, Scott was without power, 5 days ago? Last week, I was without power. Here in town, they had no power for 24 hours straight, 29 hours actually in some areas. That's life. That's winter. Welcome to the human race. California gets blackouts, brownouts from running too much AC, and because they have these giant server farms, and you don't hear a lot of cry-assing about that, but all of a sudden when it's a little bit of snow in the mountains, it's beyond, like, the fact that people digest this and they don't question it, they don't see the opposing view of it, and they just go, "Wow, it's a scientist who's saying that." Remember, 97% of scientists disagreed with Albert Einstein until he was right.
Yeah, and also remember, folks, that most scientists are funded by the government for a lot of their studies. So you're going to get the result that the government wants you to give, or you're not going to get the grant money. It's just that simple. For those of you that don't understand, that haven't had a science background like myself and like Jay, if you apply for a grant, you apply based on searching for a certain criteria in your result. And if you don't get that result or that criteria, then you don't get the grant. So you're going to push to get that result no matter what it takes, because you need that money to survive, to pay your undergrads, to pay for your supplies, to pay for everything, pay for your living expenses, etc. Now, pardon me. Just a quick disclaimer here for everybody. My dogs are going nuts. Apparently there's coyotes out tonight. So if you hear lots of dogs barking and I all of a sudden leave the screen, it's because I've had to go see what's going on because we have farm animals. And this is one interesting thing that's directly related to sort of climate and everything else, is that the effect that man's had on the climate, in my experience, with a biology and chemistry background, is more to do with the oceans and with nature and less to do with what's in the air. And so what I mean by that is that our fisheries on the planet as a whole are a fucking disaster, in my opinion. Piss poor management, shitty reporting, fudged studies, like all kinds of things. Like the oceans, the fisheries are very, very poorly managed. You've also got a bunch of conflicts in international waters and things like that. So this is a sore point for me. I think that this is one area we can manage better. There's another area that we can manage better, and things that people don't realize. And what we've done is we've encroached so much on animals' habitat that animals have decided to urbanize themselves. And here's a prime example. Coyotes are apparently I have a frog in my throat, so there's lots of frogs around. Coyotes are overabundant. They're overpopulated. And that's our fault as humans. That's our fault, because they've adapted. Coyotes are incredibly adaptable rather. And they've evolved several really cool abilities, and one of them is to adapt incredibly quick to disease, to food sources, and to habitat. And so you've got something that's so adaptable that if you displace it in one area, it will very quickly reproduce and redent itself in another area and overpopulate there. And it adapted that adaptation because of us, because it used to be just a normal thing that was just normally existing. And then we did a lot of things like displacing it, eliminating any of its predators, so that we became the only predators that it has, basically. And therein lies the problem. Now that we've eradicated anything around here that might hunt a coyote, we're the ones left to do it, or else we can't defend things like our livestock and sometimes children at parks. And I mean, we've had all kinds of incidents with coyotes in urban areas, including Stanley Park here in the Lower Mainland, where people have been injured and mauled by coyotes and coyote packs because of poor management.
Mhm. It's incumbent upon all apex predators to keep the balance of the ecosystem and we look at apex predators and we go, they're so mean, killer whales and great white sharks and crocodiles, and we think of them as cruel. Like, we don't tend to do that with wolves. They seem to get away pretty easy, but they mostly only eat mice anyway. But
wolves,
the apex predators have to, like they have to kill what comes into. They have to be very territorial because they're the only thing that keeps a lot of things in check. They're the only method of population control. Hawks, eagles will eat anything because that's their job. Their job is to make sure that no member of the rodent population gets out of control, because the rodents get out of control, they'll wipe out crops, and not just our crops, but crops naturally occurring. And so we cannot disempower apex predators and then not be apex predators. If you are an apex predator, you have to be that because the ecosystem needs you.
And to that end, all humans, even the stupidest, most moronic of humans, are apex predators. And it is your job at some points, especially if you want to maintain certain areas and certain populations of animals, it is your job at some points to consume certain animals in those areas, or else they become sick and they die of starvation and all these other things. So they're suffering horribly if you don't. And I'll give you an example: mule-tailed deer. There's the guardian dog barking again. Sorry, guys. And the fact is that deer are overpopulated in all kinds of different areas of BC. And if they aren't hunted, not only do they completely eradicate vegetation and ruin mountainsides, they also starve to death. And that creates a bunch of disease for other animals. So it's got a rippling effect all across all of the biosphere there. Everything that lives in that area gets affected by one species being overpopulated or underpopulated, and this is the reality. So when people say,
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. When people say that hunting is insensitive and it hurts their feelings and it's cruel to the animal, I submit that the cruel thing to the animal, especially because you have to understand how regulated hunting is in general. They don't let you hunt things that are underpopulated. They don't let you hunt things that are in areas that they need to be in to better that area. So it's very well, at least in my experience, it's very well managed. And you're only allowed what you have to get tagged. You're only allowed one of those things. So it's not like there's some guy out there shooting 55 deer and stocking up all of his neighbors' freezers with 55 deer. That doesn't happen. And the thing is you're generally doing a good thing for the species when you're hunting it, although you could see it as not a good thing for that individual of that species because it's a terminal fate at that point. However, you're increasing the habitat for that herd in general because it's always well managed. You're also increasing the vegetation, so therefore the food for that herd. And more importantly, you're making sure that the species doesn't get overpopulated because that species has little to no predators at this point. They have a few, cougars and various things, but nothing else is hunting deer anymore because BC wildlife management saw fit to eradicate all the wolves that lived here. Because they were too scary and too dangerous. So now we don't have anything that hunts deer. So deer, or rather wildlife, rely on us to hunt the deer, or else they will overpopulate, they will starve, they will die. And
a 30-6 is a lot kinder than starvation is. I will guarantee you that.
It sure is. Yeah. A responsible hunter is definitely an ethical hunter, and I've never known of any hunters personally that are not ethical. So, you're talking about, sure, an end of life thing, but you're also talking about something that's done ethically and it's done morally and it's done in a way that's when it's ethical, it's the least suffering for the thing that's getting knocked down, and every part of everything that I've ever hunted gets used. Every single
And there's much stiffer punishments for poaching than there is for a lot of really malignant human behavior. There is incredibly huge punishments for poaching that you would hear that and you would go, well, why don't people who rape people get that kind of treatment?
Yeah, no kidding. Try getting caught poaching and see what you've got left when you get home. If you get home, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They will take everything that you had when you did the poaching and everything that they can prove that could be even slightly related to your poaching activity. So pretty much everything that you exist with, your house, your garage, your tools, your trucks, your guns, your everything is gone. So don't get caught poaching. Let that be a lesson.
Now, the one addendum I'll make to that is this, and further to Scott's point is, you cannot hunt something for, let's say, like 15 to 18,000 years, which is human beings hunting deer in North America. You can't hunt something for 18,000 years and then one day wake up and have a flower power revolution and decide, well, we can't do that activity, and immediately stop it completely. You cannot do that. That will destroy an ecosystem. Small adjustments. It's kind of the same with our society. Yes, there's some things that need to be corrected. Revolutions end up in guillotines and USSR and Chinese basic dictatorship. This is what revolutions do. You don't want that. The things that are unethical, the things that are wrong with our society need to be changed. They need to be done in a practical and adult type of way, not willy-nilly complete moratoriums or completely opening the floodgates. You adjust things slowly. That's how the ecosystem works. It's probably the best way that our society could work, and it's the way that the free market works. So I submit that same approach of incremental, methodical, and intelligent. Always. There's a time for empathy and there's a time for brain power.
Yeah. I agree totally. Well said, Jay. That actually, you know what? That actually ties in nicely to something I was going to talk about. We've been through the ringer, you and I, us here, and anybody watching this for the past couple of years. And I think, for those of us that had ideas and suspicions and came out and said things and were labeled certain names, fringe minority, conspiracy theorists, all these different things. I think for those of you that held on to your beliefs and stood your ground, I think that you should pat yourselves on the back, because you endured, basically, by my estimation, the single greatest and a most intense propaganda assault in all of history. And the fact that you knew something was wrong right away and you stood your ground and you said, this doesn't make sense. So, for instance, things like, it doesn't make sense to me having biological weapons training. It doesn't make sense to me that we're defending ourselves from a bio threat with surgical masks. And so right away, I knew something was fucking wrong there, because if you really wanted to defend yourself from a biological threat, you need a full hazmat suit and everything has to be airtight. And you have to treat the whole suit, and there's a whole bunch of procedures. Trust me, that was complete. So right away, I knew something was wrong. So, a lot of shit was not looking quite kosher, let's say. I hope can I get a strike for that, for racism? Saying kosher? I don't know if I can say that anymore. Either way.
Only one way to find out.
Oh, there's only one way to... That's true. Also, I should also add to this that technically I'm Jewish. So, but that's besides the point. Now, my point here is I'm going to show this to you guys. So I'm going to bring this up. I think I've got I don't remember how to do this now. Share screen. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm hoping this is probably not going to work. Oh, here we go. All right. So
I think you've got it, my Junadian friend. Hashtag it, people.
I love that. That should be the thing. All right, here's folks. Here's Rick Rubin, the Rubin Report. Please follow him on Rumble. Follow me on Rumble, Fringe Monkey 22. We are going to broadcast exclusive content within the next month, maybe sooner, on Rumble. So if you're not following us on Rumble, you're going to lose out on the best stuff we do and the stuff that we can't say here on YouTube and on Twitter because they still want to censor us a little bit. So follow us on Rumble, Fringe Monkey 22. And you'll get the exclusive content. Here is Rick Rubin. All right. We'll be right back. Here's about a 3-minute clip here, guys.
Here's the Wall Street Journal this weekend. Just in, U.S. Energy Department has concluded that the COVID pandemic most likely arose from a laboratory leak, according to a new classified intelligence report. Why is it? This is the question. Why is it that the machine was so hell-bent on none of us thinking that it might be a lab leak? Perhaps then it would be because then we'd really have to think about what our relationship with China is, right? And was this a bioweapon? And was this intentional? And did the NIH actually fund some of this stuff, which Fauci under oath said that we did not? But we've got quite a segue for you. Here is Fauci contradicting news reports that gain of function was happening at the Wuhan lab, funded by the NIH.
I don't know how many times I can say it, Madam Chair. We did not fund gain of function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
In our health lead, we now know that a bat coronavirus was enhanced in a lab.
NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain of function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute.
The National Institutes of Health acknowledged that it funded research of a virus that was studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The experiment unexpectedly, we're told, made a bat coronavirus more contagious than the original naturally occurring one.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain of function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement.
A new letter raising questions about experiments in a Wuhan lab.
Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans. Right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about.
For years, the National Institutes of Health provided grant money to the EcoHealth Alliance Research Group, which conducted experiments with bat coronaviruses in Wuhan, China.
Okay, so you really got to understand what Fauci is doing here. He's been caught. Everyone gets it. He's playing, and I think this is what he was doing under oath. He's playing some weird game, whether the NIH funded EcoHealth or how the money got around or whether it was a mistake or not. And that's what his lawyers, once this really bubbles up further, as the Truth Is That Time release bill, and more people look into this and go, man, he really did lie under oath because NIH did fund gain of function research. They were looking into this coronavirus, and then they gain of function. You added a function to it. You add a function to a virus to make it jump to humans. So it can either be used as a bioweapon or so that pharmaceutical companies can come in and be like, oh my God, there's this crazy virus out there. We don't know where it came from, but you're not going to believe this. We have a vaccine for this thing, and it's just been sitting in the chest over there. It's wild. We had it in the basement on ice.
Rick Rubin there, everybody. And
Dave Rubin.
Sorry,
Rick Rubin, ZZ Top's producer.
Yeah. I'm a music guy. Give me a break. So it should be noted again with the sequences here, guys. We're just new onto this platform, so it's not as smooth as it was on the old one. But we'll get used to it. I'll get used to it. I'm to blame here. Jay is just an innocent bystander.
I think it's smoother because when we go to a clip or a share screen or whatnot, and then we come back, our audio isn't then like a second and a half off for the next 10 minutes until the program catches up, because Restream's a piece of garbage and StreamYard is awesome.
I just want to point out to everybody, here's how radical and awesome. I'm totally changing the subject just because this is just happening right now. Oh, she is? Okay. What was that? Was that your yeah? So I just had that. No, don't bring that over here. I can't show it on camera. Okay. We have we've been talking about the coyotes. You just heard me go on a rant about hunting and all the other things, and so we had some coyotes and our dogs reacting. And Erica, the wife here, decided she's going to go out and check on the but I was already out with the shotgun. I don't know. Anyways, so she decided she's going to go out and check on what's going on because the dogs are barking, and obviously we want to make sure everything's okay. And she's like, "Well, I'm going to grab a gun and go outside." Hey, how fucking cool is that? But what's even cooler is she grabs an 1896 30-30 Winchester to go outside. And I know you know how to use it. All right. Anyways, I just thought that was cool. So, folks, going back.
But enough with Wynonna Earp.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have three things related to that what you just played, and the first of which is just so that everybody knows, if you're monitoring that whole Rand Paul versus Anthony Fauci thing, if you want to know who's being derisive and dismissive in that situation, it's actually Anthony Fauci, because Rand Paul is a surgeon.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Actual surgeon. And as a surgeon, he knows and would only wear a viral mask or a bacterial mask to prevent bacterial infection. And he would never use a bacterial mask to guard against a virus, which if we go Tarantino style, we can go, what did the Trump administration do? They said, don't wear a mask. It's a virus. You're not doing anything. You're just suffocating your stupid face.
Right.
But people went, oh, we need something so that we can feel good because the sky's falling. And so the Democrats went, they want the masks. Awesome. Bring them in. And that is what occurred, actually. That's the two main things that I wanted to point out there. And the third is just so that everybody is aware, Dave Rubin is a former member of the press who left with an absolutely stellar journalistic record.
Yeah.
And he left Legacy Media because he was not able to be a journalist anymore, what he considers to be a journalist.
Mm-hmm. And you people need to forgive me for calling him Rick Rubin again. I'm well aware who Dave Rubin is, and that's why he came up in my feed, obviously for. But
watch the Lex Friedman interview of Dave Rubin, of Rick Rubin. You're gonna love that. I recommend
now
anybody.
You're confusing everybody at home. There's too many Rubins, too many podcasts, too much.
All I want is a sandwich. I want a sandwich with some mustard.
I would like a sandwich, actually. Sandwich some mustard.
Yeah.
What do you got for us as well, Jay? I have something else. Where are we here? We're at 34 minutes. I don't want to kill everybody's mood just yet. So why don't we do this? Talk us in here. I'm going to find something here. Just give me 1 minute, Jay.
Okay.
Talk about something.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to give everybody a little backstory before I read this. This is my first stab at political journalism, but I just wanted to give a little bit of backstory on this. For those of you who don't know who John Fetterman is, he is a senator in Pennsylvania, a senator who had a stroke 3 months before the midterm elections in November. I have all the empathy in the world for somebody who goes through that and for their family. And I think in that case, the empathetic thing for everyone to do is remove that gentleman from the public eye and from demanding political office so that he can get healthy, right? Why? Because if you don't, he may have another stroke, which is what he did. Don't elect people who are unhealthy just because you don't like the other party. That is stupid. That's why I was rooting against the Eagles for the Super Bowl, because I don't think people in Pennsylvania, I didn't think that people in Pennsylvania deserved a Super Bowl after that stupid action. Now, but I've changed my scope a little bit. That's because just recently in the Senate, they were the state Senate of Pennsylvania were just about to swear in a new senator, and the problem with that was that senator won by 69 votes, and there was no recount conducted. And there's 20 million people in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I think that when you have 20 million people and there's a difference in 69 votes, I think that might be the time that you should have a second look at that. The GOP, i.e. Republicans, in that Senate House, when they were trying to introduce this new senator, blocked the nomination, saying there is an ongoing court case which should directly prevent this swearing in. And our friend John Fetterman was not able to tolerate this dissent. He stood at a rostrum and began yelling and really having a bit of an adult tantrum about it. So one of the Republicans went to
set up your store
the
on a
other
single
rostrum
integrated platform.
and he
fallen or embattled prime minister.
ordered a vote by the Republicans, and they blocked that senator from being brought in. Now, what's important about this is what I wasn't realizing is John Fetterman. Would the people of Pennsylvania actually elect somebody who had just had a stroke like 90 days prior, or was that a scam? Then we look at another race in that same state and we go 69 votes difference between two candidates isn't enough for a recount. Perhaps John Fetterman was illegitimately elected, and I think that his colleagues for continuing the charade of putting somebody like that in the public eye and putting them under the stress that the public eye has is cruel and greedy and ridiculous. And it's very indicative of the liberal world that they would think that way. Whatever it takes to keep the Republican out, doesn't matter. You could have a stroke. You could not be able to speak properly. You could be falling asleep at speeches. You could think the Salvation Army is an armed force, and we will still elect you. That is the liberal mindset that is absolutely crippling intelligence in this world right now. Small microcosm, seems like a thing that isn't overly important to everybody, but it's just an example of the kind of thought process that comes out of the left wing right now. Back to you, Scott.
Back to me. Well said, and I agree. You have to look at what is being programmed as a mindset, right? I don't think liberals were always necessarily of this mindset. I think that historically liberals had a much different mindset, especially here in Canada. So keep in mind that this is a new mindset, a different kind of mindset that we're referring to, or that rather that Mr. Unacceptable himself here, Jay Shaw's referring to. So I wanted to share with everybody something kind of a little bit more on the lighter side, because I always find what's his face, Harrison Faulkner, quite kind of, I won't say comedic, quite funny, but this is quite satisfying for me, and it's true. So that lines right up with Truthfully Thursday. So I'm gonna pull this up here. Jay, give me 1 second.
Bring on the Socratic irony.
All right. Here's Mr. Harrison Faulkner. Give me 1 second here.
Minister.
There we go.
That being that the NDP, the fake socialists who shamelessly carried the government to the use of the Emergencies Act, are starting to turn on the government. Calling in the horses, invoking the Emergencies Act on the Freedom Convoy was all well and good. But Chinese election interference, that's a step too far for the NDP. How much longer can Justin Trudeau seriously hold on to the job if he can't even hold the NDP on his side? Drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel. And the comment question for the episode is this: how much longer will we have to wait until we start to see resignations inside the Liberal caucus? Let me know, and let's get into it. Now, every day, there's new information coming out about the Chinese election interference story, thanks to, of course, CSIS leaks that are finding their way onto the front page of the Globe and Mail. But first, let's start off with the most important news, the most important and timely news, that being what is taking place right now in the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. Opposition MPs in that committee are currently debating the details of an NDP motion to force MPs to vote on a national inquiry into foreign election interference. Now, although the NDP call for a national inquiry does signal the first cracks in the foundation of the Justin Trudeau Liberal Jagmeet Singh NDP coalition deal, it's not exactly black and white.
Happy news.
The Conservatives
folks.
are still accusing the NDP of covering up for the Prime Minister. The Conservative line of attack is that the NDP want to broaden the scope of this inquiry so much that it can't possibly get to the bottom of what's really going on. They're trying to delay the process, and they're trying to keep important people like Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, from testifying. Conservative MP Michael Cooper even went so far as to tell Peter Julian, the NDP MP on the committee, to cross the floor and to just join the Liberals already.
Again, the coalition at work, the NDP doing absolutely everything to assist the Liberals in covering up this scandal. And, quite frankly, at some point, maybe Peter Julian ought to just consider crossing the floor and joining the Liberals or joining the PMO because he's doing all of their work.
That was this morning. So clearly, it's not like the NDP and the Conservatives are all of a sudden best friends working against the Prime Minister. That being said, the Conservatives, although they do take issue with the NDP motion, they will be supporting the NDP motion and calling for an inquiry as well. The main amendment that Conservatives are trying to get adopted by the committee is to make sure that Justin Trudeau doesn't get to appoint the commissioner to oversee the inquiry, that the commissioner is agreed upon by all members of parliament. Now, for the past year and a half, Jagmeet Singh's NDP has been the only thing keeping Justin Trudeau in power. The NDP has been the only thing keeping Justin Trudeau in Ottawa and not out in Tofino surfing. And when asked by reporters on Tuesday if Justin Trudeau's refusal to call an inquiry into Chinese election interference would jeopardize the agreement between the NDP and the Liberals, Jagmeet Singh said it wasn't a decision he was going to make today, but that he continued to call on the government to open an inquiry.
My name is Jim Rickards. I'm a former advisor to the CIA, Department of Defense, and the White House. In a moment, you'll have my own evidence that very few people have seen. You'll see how I believe two acts of democratic stupidity are about to combine into a storm that will change America forever: the American Energy Armageddon. In fact, due to specific circumstances created by the Armageddon, it's possible you could now.
Is this an issue that could put your supply and confidence deal with the Liberals at risk if they don't take steps to deal with the serious issue of foreign interference in our elections?
Well, that's not a decision we're making today in terms of if we're going to an election or not, but it is something that we take very seriously. I have made the call for a public inquiry. So far, the Prime Minister has said that's not something he's going to do. We disagree on that. I think it should be a public independent inquiry that investigates this, that assesses the real dangers and provides us with real transparency around what happened and ways that we can prevent it from having an influence in any way on our democratic system. I think that is important to have that independence, assess that risk, and to provide us with recommendations. So I maintain my position, and I will continue to apply pressure on the government to move forward on an inquiry.
Despite all of that, despite all of the pressure coming from his own team, the NDP, despite the pressure coming from legacy media outlets, journalists, and former CSIS directors all calling on the government to open an inquiry, and despite the fact that members inside CSIS are so concerned about Justin Trudeau's lack of action when it comes to election interference that they are now in full revolt against the Prime Minister and leaking everything to the Globe and Mail. Despite all of that, the Prime Minister remains defiant. He refuses to call an inquiry. If you have nothing to hide, then what's the problem?
How will your government respond to that request?
I think one of the most important things to remember is we have an awful lot of mechanisms that are underway right now around determining what kind of foreign interference has happened, is continuing.
Anybody that knows about
demonstrating the tools
tells
we have.
and people
Right
that are
now,
talking
as we're speaking,
can tell this guy's
the
lying.
parliamentary committee is hearing directly from national security experts and officials as to the work that they've been doing over the past many years to counter ongoing interference.
Because on Wednesday, Justin Trudeau's national security advisor, Jody Thomas, who many of you remember from the Emergencies Act inquiry, told MPs that Justin Trudeau had been briefed multiple times about election interference in 2019 and 2021.
How many times was the Prime Minister briefed about Beijing's interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections?
The Prime Minister would have been briefed on foreign interference in the elections multiple times between 2019 and 2021 and 2022. We will endeavor to get you those dates.
So you will undertake to provide the dates and the agencies and those involved in briefing the Prime Minister?
We will.
Nobody's taking this guy seriously. Look at him. Like, he looks like he's, I don't know, about 104 pounds.
Endeavor to get the dates for
Every instance that he was briefed in respect of Beijing's election interference.
I will do my best. But again, I was not in this job at the time.
Briefed multiple times, eh? Well, that doesn't jive too well with what Justin Trudeau was telling reporters back in November about never being briefed about candidates receiving money from China.
But let me be clear. I do not have any information, nor have I been briefed, on any federal candidates receiving any money from China.
Hold on. I'm being far too critical of the Canadian government, aren't I? I'm not giving them nearly enough credit. Because on Tuesday, the Canadian government told us that attempts to interfere in the election in 2021 did not impact the outcome of the election. Because the very conveniently timed report on the Public Election Incident Protocol of 2021 tells us that there's nothing to worry about. What if I told you that the man who wrote that report, the report on Tuesday that says there's nothing to worry about here in Canada, there's no concerns about election interference, what if I told you that that man was the former CEO of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation? Would you be surprised to hear such a thing? Or might you say to yourself, Justin Trudeau stacking government positions with true loyalists who would never do anything to question his leadership, judgment, or integrity? Tell me something I don't know. That's exactly it, though. The report that tells Canadians there was nothing to worry about in the 2021 election was written by a man named Morris Rosenberg. Morris Rosenberg previously served as the CEO of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. And the story gets absolutely hilarious from here. During the time that Morris Rosenberg was the leader of the Trudeau Foundation, a Chinese billionaire named Jiang Bin donated $1 million to the foundation. Of course, totally coincidental, not because Justin Trudeau, the son of the man whose name is on the charity, is the Prime Minister of Canada. Donating to the Trudeau Foundation wouldn't give Jiang Bin any influence over the government. Of course not. Jiang Bin must have been truly moved by the work being done by the Pierre Trudeau Foundation to feel as though that was a good place to put his money. Well, through these CSIS leaks, Jiang Bin, who donated $1 million to the Trudeau Foundation, also was donating lots of money to the University of Montreal. And one of Jiang Bin's requests to the University of Montreal was to erect a statue of Mao along with Pierre Trudeau at the foot of the University of Montreal Law School. Now, someone at the University of Montreal had the presence of mind to say no to the Mao and Trudeau statue. I think maybe the optics weren't exactly what they were going for, too on the nose perhaps. But if you're asking me, the University of Montreal is not prominent enough for such a statue. Isn't there a pedestal in the middle of Montreal just waiting for a new statue to be placed on it? But if having what appears to be a coup taking place inside CSIS against the Prime Minister wasn't enough, and if having the NDP turning on the Prime Minister wasn't enough for Justin Trudeau, well, as icing on the cake last night, the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation released a statement saying they would be reimbursing Zhang Bin for a $200,000 donation, saying that they cannot, as a nonpartisan, independent charity, they can keep any donation that may have been sponsored by a foreign government.
Yeah,
and if that sounds to you like an
200,000.
admission of guilt, well, you're not alone, because that
That's
is
the only
exactly what was being
donation, for
discussed
sure.
on Twitter. A bank robber that returns the money is still a criminal. Yeah, we received this donation back in 2016, but now it's looking like we probably shouldn't have taken it. So we're going to give it back to you now in 2023. All the influence you were trying to gain out of making that donation has already been given to you. So congratulations, and here's your money back as well. Too little, too late. Only when you were found out do you do this. Political corruption stinks, and you are part of the stench. Just a coincidence, and the drop in donations after your namesake's son leaves office won't drop at all. Not corruption in the least. Never happened before to anyone else in North America who has had a foundation. And take a look at this graph. This is from a National Post article back in 2016. Journalists for many years have known about the details in regards to the Pierre Trudeau Foundation and influence that it may or may not buy you with the sitting Prime Minister of Canada. Now, conveniently, starting in 2014, all of a sudden, a massive spike in foreign donations to the Pierre Trudeau Foundation all of a sudden occurs. But that is surely just a coincidence, not something I think Canadians should be concerned about. That would be, of course, however, if the Trudeau Foundation didn't just basically sink the Prime Minister's political career. The Ratio of the Week award is going to none other than Liberal MP Han Dong for his weak and pathetic statement in the face of allegations that he benefited from Chinese communist election interference. In the statement in which Dong denies the allegations, he conveniently locked replies on his tweet because facing the people is the last thing this Liberal MP would want to do at this moment. He received 514 quote tweets to only 149 likes. George responded by saying, "The fact that you don't allow comments says more about you than your entire statement. Resign." First, this Chinese lackey turns off replies. Then he pretends it's the media calling his loyalty into question. No, sir, it's CSIS. And we know you and at least 10 of your colleagues are compromised. Likely far more, including an appointed senator. Time to step down, resign. Liberal MP investigated himself and deemed everything was good to go. Just like the Liberal government investigated themselves and said everything was good to go. That's the pattern. That's their strategy. Do you buy it? Obviously you don't. Let's be real. Reminder, let me know in the comments, when will we start to see resignations from the Liberal caucus? All right, that's going to do it for us this week on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.
Three parts crazy.
3 parts crazy. Exactly.
But I actually am optimistic as a result of that. And the reason I'm optimistic is because if we look back at the last 8 or 9 months in US and Canadian politics, we see that CSIS, the FBI, CIA, that there are good people working in those organizations who will risk their professional good.
That's right.
And their career
That's right.
for the truth.
That's right.
After these people get slandered and maligned for decades, and now we see that they are the last line of defense against tyrannical government. And that makes me very optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a silver lining, you know. I'm not the harbinger of doom. But I think it's important to note what's going on. It's Truthly Thursdays, so sometimes the truth hurts a little bit. And you know what? On that note, I've got one other clip to play, and this one hits close to home for those of us that are certainly here from Canada. Just about a year ago, we had some protesters, some brilliant men and women, descend upon Ottawa in the form of a protest known as the Freedom Convoy 2022, or the Trucker Protest, or whatever you want to call it. And their goal was to get an audience with their officials to tell them that their tyrannical mandates and measures didn't make sense. And we're tying this in because, as I just showed you previously, you know, we know that the coronavirus didn't come, from a bat and a wet market. We know that was released and conveniently released. And the vaccine makers just happened to have a vaccine on the shelves just for that thing, oddly enough. But that's not my point here. My point here is that these people descended on Ottawa, disagreeing with the mandates because a lot of things didn't make sense, as I've pointed out to everybody in the stream here. To four in the stream, a lot of things didn't make sense to a lot of people, and so we all just kind of stood back and went, "Wait, what?" And some of those people, I was unfortunately not lucky enough to join some of the people that went and descended upon Ottawa, but I would have loved to. But some of the most heroic and motivated people among us went to Ottawa and protested this, and they invoked the Emergencies Act, and they used a whole bunch of reasoning to invoke the Emergencies Act. And so in that process, they also created the need for an inquiry, and that inquiry was headed by Justice Rouleau. I've mentioned his name down in the ticker at the bottom. Every stream we have folks down at the bottom, our socials, our social information, where to find us, as well as what our stream content in that particular instance or that particular day might be, as well as some general fuck yous to the government. And one of those is in there tonight towards Justice Rouleau, who was a liberal justice. We all knew this. I suspected this from the beginning, and I was quite vocal about the fact in the beginning that I thought that a justice appointed by a liberal government would certainly not find contrary to the liberal government's favor, and they did not. And so the hearing was had. The hearing was mandated by the invocation of the Emergencies Act. We all hoped and prayed that maybe perhaps there would be a finding in our favor. There was not. And when I say in our favor, in the favor of freedom, democracy, and justice here in Canada, and that was not the case. And I feel it's necessary for those of you that may not be following this and may not pay enough attention to see this, because this isn't going to go down in any history book as a pivotal moment, in my opinion. This is going to be swept under the rug. And all of what's happened in the past couple of years, especially starting with the trucker convoy, has been historic in Canada's history and Canada's culture and Canada's a modern culture. And we ought not forget this, as what it did is create hope. What it did was create a movement worldwide, globally, as we saw last week from our last episode, rather, from Christine Anderson, that this wasn't just here in our country, it was everywhere. And unfortunately, our courts are mostly bought, our justices and our judges are mostly bought, but don't lose hope. There's a way to change that. But I want to roll this this bit I have here. This is Tamara Leach, who was pivotal in the movement of the Freedom Convoy, the trucker convoy. She was the lady who was brilliant enough to raise $10 million twice to fund the movement. Just that in itself should speak volumes. On top of that, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. That as well should speak volumes. So I'm gonna take us right out of the screen here in a second. This is gonna be Tamara Leach and her team members with Andrew Lawton of True North, and I think this is a telling interview of where we're at, and I want everybody to pay close attention. All right, here we go.
You're tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
I said a few moments ago, we have a very special guest joining us, and this person has been through a tremendous ordeal, and I'm so glad she's here today. And she has a bit of an entourage with her, which I think is more deserving with her than it is to Justin Trudeau when he shows up there. But the woman who united the country, who shook the world, as the subtitle of my book indicates, and who helped raise $10 million twice for the Freedom Convoy, Tamara Leach, is with me. Tamara, thank you so much for being here. I know it's not the best of occasions. having you on brightens things up a little bit.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having us, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Hey, us. Let's contextualize this. Who are you with right now?
I've got two fellow board members with me, Miranda Gassier and Ryan Mihilowicz.
All right. Well, they're a little bit out of frame when we have the two of us on screen together, but when you're talking, we'll do it on full frame so we get it in all the glory. But let me just first ask how you feel right now.
Well, it's been an emotional morning. I'm disappointed, but sadly not surprised. I don't think any of us were really surprised, but we were really holding out hope for a different outcome.
When you look back at your participation in the commission, I think the one thing that I just, having spoken to you on a number of occasions socially and privately, felt is that it was the first and really only opportunity you've had to tell your story and to speak to Canadians and to speak beyond the mainstream media depiction of you, the Justin Trudeau's depiction of you. And even with this result and with this report, do you feel there was something positive in that experience, or is the whole thing tainted for you?
Well, you nailed it exactly. I felt that was obviously the first opportunity that I've had to tell my story. And I literally left the commission that day feeling like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I really felt at that time that the commissioner was really listening to me and empathetic, I guess, to our plight. Yeah, I'm still a little shocked, I guess. I like I said, this wasn't a surprising decision, but we were holding out hope for something a little more.
Yeah, I will say, just going back to the commission for a moment, there was something that I actually felt was quite moving when Paul Champ, who's the lawyer representing the residents and businesses of Ottawa, very much an anti, very much a figure against a lot of what you've stood for and what you've done. But he actually took a somewhat sympathetic approach in his questioning with you and saying, I know you're not a national security risk. I know you didn't pocket all this money. I know that you're not, all of these things. And certainly when you see that and hear that, you have to wonder if it's legal strategy or if it's that you had done just such a good job at presenting yourself in a good light that he knew that trying to vilify you wouldn't work. But it did seem like, even reading a bit of the commissioner's report now, that the sense is that, okay, maybe Tamara Lich is fine, but they couldn't control all these other people.
I like you, I was quite surprised by Mr. Champ's cross-examination of me, because I'd watched him cross-examine so many people before. So I was actually surprised when he came out and seemed to be a little softer with me. I mean, he did ask some hard questions still, but he didn't come out swinging like I anticipated that he was going to. So I think that was good. I think a lot of the testimony that was heard at the commission really painted the other side of the story. There's so many stories out here, and like I said, we heard them every day. And at the very least, I feel that the testimonies that we heard at the POEC gave a voice to Canadians and Canadians' concerns, if that makes sense.
Right now, there are going to be a lot of people who, to go back to 2020, 2021, felt very pessimistic about Canada and very disheartened by everything that had happened in Canada. And then a year ago, felt very hopeful and very encouraged. And for a lot of people, that chapter was the first time in a couple of years they felt truly proud to be Canadian. And where are you now on this question? I mean, if you look today at how you feel and looking around at, people you've made friendships with along the way, how do you think they're going to feel now?
Well, what I'm hearing is a lot of disappointment. Obviously, my phone's been buzzing since 10:15 this morning. There is some anger out there, but I guess my message has always been we need to stay focused. We need to stay positive. I truly believe we can take this opportunity and look at it as an opportunity. And, we'll be busy here today. Obviously, there's 2,000 pages in that document. We'll go through it today with the lawyers and our team, have a good look at it. But I really hope that this doesn't discourage Canadians. It is so disappointing, and I'm going to cry again. But it's not like everyone hasn't seen me cry a million times already. I really hope that we can try and take this and steer it in a way that we can have a positive outcome, or we can, have a common goal, or try and make change. We're going to meet with the legal team this afternoon and talk about next steps now.
This was, in your view, always, as you've said time and time again, a peaceful protest. And one of the things that the report has really done, I think, is tried to cast doubt on that and to really redefine, it seems, what peace is and what a peaceful protest is, and, about the disruption, about the noise, about things like that. And what would your message be to the people of Ottawa that felt, they showed up on our streets, they had these big trucks, they had these big horns, that was not peaceful to me?
Well, like I said in my testimony, we were never we never wanted to upset the Ottawa residents. We really didn't, but we did feel that we had a message, and, I guess the honking of the horns was unfortunate. I mean, I feel, looking back, there's a lot of things I guess we could have done differently, but I think for the most part, we did everything right. I mean, when we saw what was happening, we recognized the magnitude, and our first instinct was to focus on safety, making sure that our people were safe, everybody was going to be safe, respecting the police. If you saw any of the videos that I ever did, or any of us did, even Chris Barber's TikToks, we were all advocating for a peaceful protest and following the law and respecting our police officers, and trying to get along with Ottawa residents, because we needed the support. We were hoping for the support.
The idea of freedom in January 2022, I think, was freedom from vaccine mandates, freedom from lockdowns and restrictions. And I would say, from my perspective, on February 14th of 2022, it changed dramatically. And now the Emergencies Act was in play, and the idea of freedom was about something much larger than COVID. And I think that was why you saw Canadians that might not have even supported the message that you were sharing a few weeks prior, that were saying, okay, I really don't like what the government has done now. I really don't like how the government's acting. And that's going to be the big question. And I mean, obviously this report says that there may have been a sound legal footing for Justin Trudeau to do that, but that doesn't mean there was a sound moral footing. And I don't think that means Canadians will, in 3, 4, 5 years, look back upon this favorably.
I think you're right. I don't think they will. And same with the when his father called the War Measures Act. It was years later when that was started to be condemned also, so I guess time will tell. Time will tell. I found it, I guess the one takeaway from what we watched this morning that really struck me was Commissioner Rouleau saying that he felt that it was appropriate that they enacted the Emergencies Act, but that the government could have done more. So that kind of confused me.
I'm calling him rollover Rouleau from now
Canada, in my opinion. But we have to stick together, and we have to keep working together. We cannot make change in this country if we are all divided.
One thing I have to ask you about it, and I found this to be quite disheartening in Commissioner Rouleau's report, and I don't know if you've come across it yet, but he talks about the fringe minority comment, which I think now is so famous and everybody knows what I'm referring to. And he basically makes excuses for Justin Trudeau there. And he says, well, he was not really talking about them all. He was talking about just some of them, and the media took him out of context and so on. And you were one of the people that he was talking about there. So how do you feel about that comment looking back on it, and the effect that had on the approach that you've had to the government, and that, your friends sitting beside you today and around the country have had to this government in the last year?
Well, I thought it was quite humorous, honestly, at the inquiry when Ms. Chipiuk, asked him about calling Canadians names, and he denied it. And I've seen it. Like I said in my testimony, my prime minister was calling me a racist, and he was questioning whether or not I should be tolerated. And like I said, and I stand by it. If you are going to lead a country, you lead everybody in your country. You don't get to pick and choose who you get to look after and who you don't get to look after. Yeah, I that's quite stunning.
This trick to get gas for a penny is going to get banned in Canada. This ex-programmer got fired from his job.
I know that, and I've been deliberately cautious about which questions I ask you and how I word this, because I know that you are still under some bail conditions here, which we've reported on in the past. And I think that's an important point, though, for people, is that even if the trucks are off the street, the Emergencies Act Commission is over, this is still very much an ongoing thing for you, for Chris Barber. And I wanted to just ask if you have any updates you can share about this at all. And if you can't, that's absolutely fine. But about where things are and what you're expecting in the future.
Well, we did have I was in court yesterday morning, which was why I was late for the documentary. Actually, the irony is that we're in Calgary right now. That's why we're all together. We came up here and went to the premiere of Trudeau on Trial last night, which was a documentary created about the inquiry. So it's a kind of ironic that this is happening today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
I forgot my question too now because I was so enthralled with what you were saying. But it was basically about just the status of your legal ordeals right now.
Yeah, so we were in court yesterday. What was supposed to happen yesterday and today was we had a motion for particulars to be heard as we're trying to get that information out of the Crown prosecutor. What ended up happening was the deputy Crown stepped in and they are applying for a different judge. They want an out-of-town judge apparently to preside over next month's hearings because Mr. Barber is obviously filed an application of a charter breach when the Crown prosecutor released all of his text message information. So they're looking to change the judge for that, which would mean that we would be changing judges for the rest of our hearings, which would cause a delay for everything. So we're really hoping that doesn't happen. She's going to render her decision on that, I think, March 13th.
Well, we'll certainly keep an eye peeled on that. And just because your road captains there have been so patient in during this interview, I just wanted to give the floor to them for a moment and just any thoughts they have about the movement right now, about the commission, about Tamara, about anything. The floor is yours.
Sure. Well, what happened today, I don't think I'm taking a positive out of it, and I'm hoping to bring Canada together, and we can all create something and bring peace back into this country. That's about all I can say right now, because I'm kind of. I don't know how. I don't know how.
Stunned.
Yeah,
I think we're all a little bit shell shocked still.
Stunned by
You
it,
know,
yeah.
is that you know?
It comes from a place of, I was just talking about the first couple pages of my book. I can't tell you how many times I said the words, how can any of this be wrong? And I think that it's really hard to come to this place today and still feel that we did nothing wrong, but, you know, stand up for our democratic right to protest. And Rouleau took that away in a sense today. So it's a step back and focus on where we go next from here.
Well, thank you so much, not only for coming on, but for taking such, I think, I'm getting a little emotional now, but in spite of everything you've all been through, taking such a hopeful approach to something that I think right now a lot of people are going to feel very dark about. And as I've said to you privately, Tamara, I want you to send me a text the minute those bail restrictions are lifted, and I'm going to be like on a plane to Medicine Hat, and we're going to do this properly and in person. And then we're gonna like drink until the night is morning. So I hope I can still I hope I can count on that spare room you told me about there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you, and seriously, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to the Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.
All right, so there you have it, folks. A little bit of a dark day. Again, I apologize for the timing of the sequencing and the cameras coming back and stuff. Unfortunately, we're new here with this with the StreamYard thing, but we'll get it together. Either way, a little bit of a dark day for us here in Canada. A little bit of a dark week. Oh, Jay, I don't have your audio. There you are.
Oh, okay. There's a bit of a flip side to this whole thing, and that is this: the Emergency Act inquiry is called an act because it's a Canadian law. When the Emergencies Act is enabled, there is another act that says there must be an inquiry. Now, all laws have a scope, right? There's a certain number of things that they can have an impact on, right? And the law, you can't create it so that it can be twisted and manipulated. That's a very, very bad thing. That's the problem with the Emergency Act. It can be twisted and manipulated. Now, the Inquiry Act is the same thing. It's also can be twisted and manipulated. So what the Inquiry Act's scope is to make sure that when and if the Emergency Act was used, we could assess its effectiveness, because you don't know until you actually use it. It hadn't been used until now. This is the first time. And so the purpose of the inquiry is to say, does this work? Although the justice who oversaw this inquiry did not point any fingers at the government that enacted the act, he did say that it's a pretty useless act. He was very critical of the way that the Emergency Act is written, and somewhat critical of the way that the Emergency Act inquiry is put on paper. So of the things that it's supposed to do, it successfully did that.
I didn't get anything critical from what he reported, though. Honestly,
you didn't.
No,
I've got a quote that it says here. I'll bring it up. Okay.
The only thing I saw critical from him was his criticism of the actual handling of the information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beyond that, there was literally no other criticism.
Well, I've got a line here that says the wording, the legal, in the legal sense of the word, of the Emergency Act is not ossified, intentional, or specific enough to create a just parameter for the institution of the act itself. And what that means is,
well,
it's way too ambiguous. The way that it was written in 1988 is way too ambiguous, and it leaves way too much space for somebody like Justin Trudeau to misinterpret and misuse it. Now, if he would have said, Trudeau's a bad guy, the Liberal Party fucked up, this is unacceptable,
we don't.
That wouldn't have actually done anything. That still would have been up to somebody else to interpret his words and then to go after him. That's what the Supreme Court does. There's 4 cases that the Supreme Court has accepted, which are cases versus the Canadian government, which will be seen at the Supreme Court level. There's an appeal for Brian Peckford's case as per the violation of the charter that we all endured as Canadians. That's going to be seen at the Supreme Court. The case that Chris Barber has is another charter breach. That's going to be seen at that level. Those are the things that will actually have an impact. The inquiry was never going to do anything to Trudeau. It was not the purpose of it.
Granted, but one would expect that if you have a government who has invoked an act with such severe implications, it's an act that was meant to put us into a state where we're defending ourselves from a foreign invader, from war. Okay, that's what the design of the act was. So you have to expect that when they invoked an act,
except it doesn't say that anywhere in it. The word war is not used in the Emergencies Act. It's not there.
They had to get it out of there because previously it was known as the War Measures Act, and it had to be changed so that it could be invoked when it didn't necessarily reflect war as in the respect of global war or another a global conflict. You know, so
and that would I would say that would make the scope too narrow. This can only be used for war. Well, you can't use it for domestic terrorism at all then, right? Like, so you can't have a scope that's too narrow, but as it sits, it's way too broad.
Granted. However, again, we had a justice find that the implication or the invocation rather of this Emergencies Act was justified, and there was no national emergency, and this is the
and that's but you said the important words you said there. He said the invocation of this act, and then 3 paragraphs later he criticizes this act. According to this document, what they did was justifiable. That document is wrong, meaning we can't use that document anymore, because if it can be used correctly in an improper way.
I think more the point here is that this government is not being held accountable for their abuse of the languaging of this act, and they should be. And that
I think they are by CSIS and cops. And I mean, that's the thing. I see positives here, right? I saw CSIS in the inquiry. They criticized the government. I saw the police in the inquiry say we didn't ask for it, we didn't need it.
Criticism amounts to nothing.
And guess what? Justin Trudeau is not coming to your door with a warrant. A police officer is.
Right. But
so if I can trust the cops, that's more important than trusting a politician, who I will never trust anyway. Right. Asking for a trustworthy politician is like the stupidest thing you can ever do. You can't trust by being a smart person. You don't trust your government. You question it at all times. Who you want to trust? Cops, government intelligence agencies. And what we're seeing now is the backlash of, first of all, with the gun control. The police did not stand with the government on gun control.
No,
we see this. We see CSIS throwing the Liberals under the bus because that's the pushback.
The police did stand with the government on enforcing an Emergency Act invocation that was unjustified and beating their own citizens with, you know, the butts of their rifle and their knees and beating veterans into the ground for no reason. They did support
the OPP
that,
did,
so,
yeah. One group of police.
No. Careful what you say.
There wasn't any RCMP agents there.
There were RCMP agents there, absolutely. 100%.
That was those Green Goblins were the OPP's riot squad.
In fact, you're incorrect. They weren't all just OPP. They weren't.
Well, I don't actually believe that any of them. I believe that they came from NATO myself. I don't think they were Canadians at all. Myself.
No,
I think
they would have come from the UN, not NATO. NATO doesn't deploy in a situation like that, and UN shouldn't deploy in a situation like that either. However, when our Prime Minister fucktard invoked the Emergencies Act, he immediately invited the UN to intervene in a way that they felt was necessary. And so anybody in the crowd that was enforcing the crowd control could have been from anybody. So it could have been from Poland or Czechoslovakia or who fucking knows where. The point is that they weren't held accountable for their illegal invocation of this Emergencies Act. And
no government ever is while they're in power. It never happens, ever. Well, so it's a false hope to even suspect that'll happen. Well, as Tamara Leach said, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, we'll know, and it'll be seen in history as a wrong, and that's how it always happens. Right?
Well, hopefully, it's seen in history as a wrong. And folks, I think that is going to do us for the night. Jay, do you have anything you want to leave in closing here?
When Thomas Jefferson left Freedom Hall at the founding of the American Constitution, he was accosted in the street by a lady who said, "Mr. Jefferson, what type of a nation have you given us?" And he said, "A republic, madam, if you can hold it."
Absolutely. it should be noted for people that that is a very important quote. You might want to look that one up. My final quote will be for tonight's cast, or tonight's stream rather. Better a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And on that note, we're going to call it tonight, folks. It's been fun. We are the Unacceptables. My name is Scott. This is Jay. We'll see you again on Sunday. I hope you're good. Much love. Take care of yourselves, kids.
Rick, rock and roll.